unprecedented. Well, I guess not. I guess this is potentially the third assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And we need to jump into this because there's a lot of questions being raised. A lot of people are speculating that somehow this is involving Iran. There's a lot of questions there on how could someone with a gun get that close to the president at a very high-profile White House dinner. What does this mean for the future of the Iran war? And then we're also going to talk about the financial implications of this. I think a lot of people are not really understanding what's really going on here. We're looking at the world's fertilizer supply. We're looking at the world's oil supply. I know the mood here in the United States is everyone's getting very tired of this war. People are just kind of assuming, it is what it is. But I think we're about to see a major global crunch here. So we're going to bring in our rest of our panelists here and jump right in it today on Let's Talk Geopolitics. We've got Alex from Reporterfy Media and Larry Janssen. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Good to be
Larry,
with you guys.
Great to see all of you guys. In the later part of our segment, I will be covering the financial markets, including the oil shock that the world is about to experience. And I will go into a little bit more detail about how we can get out of this mess, how to avoid it, but it's coming. And this is too big not to fail, but too big to hide. Back to you, Cyrus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to welcome in Larry Janssen here to the show. So, Larry, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you're doing well. And Larry, I would like to get your I want to jump right into the discussion today. I want to get your thoughts, on this. We see Donald Trump last night attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Of course, this is one of the most high-profile dinners in the United States. Larry, my first question. Do you think that it's bizarre that someone with a gun could get that close? There's a lot of people coming out with conspiracy theories. A lot of chatter on this on Twitter. It's remarkable to me that somebody with a gun could get that close to the president, and then immediately him starting to say, "Well, everyone, this is why we need a $400 million ballroom."
Yeah,
like to get your thoughts.
No, look, a lot of this doesn't add up. Number one, did you see the video of when the shots are being fired outside this ballroom? So he never even got close to Trump or to any luminary inside. But the first guy that gets pulled off stage was J.D. Vance. I watched that and go, what's going on? Where was his Secret Service detail? He's supposed to be the first guy off the stage, not number two. It was like a 30-second delay. So, that's number one. Number two, this guy, I think, I don't know if we ever fully learned the truth. I'm inclined to believe that just like the lawsuit that was filed against the Southern Poverty Law Center, who had been paying KKK, paying neo-Nazis to go out and create incidents to make it look like it was right wing. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in the FBI that they had worked through cutouts to encourage this guy to go to D.C. and do this. Reportedly, he was a guest at the hotel, and so how he just packed his shotgun in his suitcase, and bringing a firearm into Washington D.C. D.C. is probably more strict than California on many of those issues. Right. So it just, like I said, a lot of this stinks to high heaven. I do know that we had the previous report that Iran was trying to kill Trump. And there was a trial of, they arrested a couple of guys that when you dug into it, you realized the person who was organizing this, quote, suicide or assassination attempt, he had been picked up first in Sri Lanka. No, not Sri Lanka, Singapore. And we know how Singapore is with, chewing gum, dealing in drugs. They're not very friendly.
Right.
He got picked up, but was never tried, never imprisoned. He got caught by the DEA. Well, that right away tells you he became a DEA informant. That's how you get to walk on charges like that. He then spent some time supposedly in Iran working with an oil company. And then the narrative that was put out was that the IRGC selected him for this secret mission. Again, this smacked of an intelligence operation trying to, paint somebody as an Iranian asset carrying this out. So I just want to wait, another 24, 36 hours to see, do they try to tie this to anything other than, by God, we got to have a ballroom, you know.
Yeah.
The-
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree with you, Larry. As far as that there's a lot of speculation here. I think that the funny thing is I don't understand the need for a ballroom. I mean, for example, I'm going to give everybody a really interesting, kind of insight here. So when Donald Trump goes to a golf course to play a round of golf, okay, do you know how much detail in advance is prepared for that? So, for example, I have friends that have worked at a golf course that, was receiving Donald Trump. And again, it's like 48 hours before his arrival. The Secret Service is there. They're scouting everything out. They have an entire team there that is spread throughout the entire golf course, to make sure that it is secure, because it is a very open area, right? But essentially, that golf course is locked down for the president for his entire duration that he's able to go and play around a golf. It just seems very strange to me that, you're automatically saying, well, guys, this is why we need a ballroom, because, it's about the security. Give me a break. This is the president of the United States. Wherever he is going in the world at all times, at any day, the Secret Service is going to be protecting him. There is, a tremendous amount of, detail that goes into that. So I don't buy this whole, ballroom narrative at all. I think it's nonsense, because if the Secret Service is doing their job, which we know, this is it's President of the United States, for gosh sakes. They're going to have this stuff organized. Yeah. And I think what's more of an interesting red flag is, we got to go back to Butler, and we got to go back to that assassination attempt, because the interesting thing that we've learned about since then is that the head of security, okay, for that operation was actually promoted under Donald Trump. So you have kind of what we would call basically a failed, secret security, experience. Obviously, it was not well protected in Butler. There was a lot of people were speculating, how could a gunman, be able to get a shot off in this area? It's just basically a disaster. Obviously, that would, in normal circumstances, result in somebody getting fired, but they actually got promoted. So it's like, interesting there. Donald Trump doesn't seem to be one that would reward somebody for poor performance. So I don't know. There's a lot of speculation going on here. And I think we're very early into this, right? So I don't want to jump to conclusions and say, hey, this is the fact, this is what's happening on. But you do see an interesting thing as far as Donald Trump polling very low in the polls. The Iran war is extremely, dispopular. So I could certainly see a scenario where, if we can paint this, that Iran is behind this, we're going to get more people on board with this war, because we know one thing, gentlemen, is that in the future, we're not slowing down anywhere. There's no exit ramp here from Iran. Yesterday there was a clip of Donald Trump saying that, hey, we were going to send our guys to Pakistan for a meeting, but we've decided, we don't want to go that far. It's a little bit too far. It's too expensive. I'm a very cost-conscious person, was the exact quote from Donald Trump, essentially saying that, he didn't want to waste the air ticket, the airline fuel and the tickets to go over to negotiate. And then he said, we have all the cards, and if Iran wants to talk, they'll reach out to us. So very interesting things that's happening right now with this Iran war, and kind of where we are. What is this, going into week 9 now of the Iran war with no exit ramp and no clear strategy?
Right. Well,
seems a bit
why
crazy.
didn't this shooter, I don't understand why he's alive. Because the way these securities, you set up security rings, or you go out. So he breached the first ring. He got stopped at the first ring. Okay, everybody out there's got guns, and so with a guy carrying a gun, and he had already shot one police officer. In the apparently he was reportedly using a shotgun. But the officer had a vest on, some body armor, but he was not filled with holes. They should have lit him up, but instead, he's alive, he's intact. yeah, there's just a lot that smells about this. I was amused, comment on the golf course, because I used to be a member at a golf course in Washington D.C. called Avenel, and that's
Okay,
where Barack Obama went to play and Joe Biden went to play. In fact,
gotcha.
Hunter was temporarily a member of that, so I personally witnessed, being on the course,
Right,
playing a hole in front of Joe Biden one time.
gotcha,
So yeah,
gotcha.
so this there's a lot here that just it makes you wonder what they're doing. What we are seeing on the Iran front is the Iranians have made it very clear what they want, and Trump's story keeps changing. He is uh, he's on all sides of the issue, either that the Iranians are in complete disarray, or that hey, they've sent a pretty good proposal this time, and it turns out it's the same damn proposal they had 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So yeah, you look at that and you realize there's a we've built up an enormous amount of force again, and I don't believe you do that just for show.
No, I think it was really interesting, gentlemen, as I had a chance to speak to Robert Pape, who is the University of Chicago
Yeah.
professor. He's been making the rounds as well, and he has a very interesting Substack called the Escalation Trap, and this is basically his theory, his political theory. And we were chatting about this, and he had a very interesting take on basically the events of the Iran war and how things are unfolding. And he just said, if you're looking at all of this, it just follows a pattern, and the United States and Iran are going further and further down this escalation trap. And the problem is we're looking at a zero-sum game here, right? For example, I think the United States and Israel, they desperately need to have a win. Now, what does that win mean? I guess for them, it means to, if we can get the enriched uranium out of Iran, we can then say Iran is not a threat anymore. We've won the war. Everybody, let's go home. Let's celebrate. Let's crack a beer. We've won. We've won the contest in the Middle East. But obviously, this is a huge issue, for Iran, because it deals with their sovereignty, and it also deals with the
Mhm.
fact that if you give up your enriched uranium, you're going to be very liable to another attack from the United States and Israel. And so, we see, yeah, we just basically see two sides stuck, and it's kind of in a similar position, I guess, with Russia, Ukraine, where both sides are stuck, and it's just going into a war of attrition. But the longer, I want to go back to that comment from Donald Trump saying, the longer, I'm a very cost conscious person. I don't want to be wasting time getting on a plane and traveling for a peace negotiation. That's an expensive flight. Well, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
okay, we've spent how many billion? 70 billion. Let's put it modestly, $70 billion on a new war. I think every day that the Strait of Hormuz is closed is costing. What is that costing the global economy in terms of the amount of barrels of oil that are taking off the market? And again, there's a huge compounding thing here where we've seen a lot of these oil tankers have actually been delivered to the United States in recent days, because those are the oil tankers that have left before the Iran war started.
Right.
So again, these oil tankers take months to get to their final destination. So anything that's leaving ports on the end of February, those are still in the open water. They're getting to their final destinations. But
Yeah.
the rubber's about to meet the road here, where we're going to see all of a sudden, all of these shipments are not coming in because, gosh, it's been, closed for almost 2 months, there's some ships that go through, but, 90% of the capacity has been reduced. And that's a massive hit to the global economy.
Exactly. Let me let me extend some information on that. So the oil shock is here. And as Cyrus was talking about, actually the last VLCC container that has about 2 million barrels of oil has entered and released its oil in its last destination in the United States about 4 days ago. That's it. Now, if we estimate, as Cyrus is saying, we're out. That's it. Everything seems normal right now. But let's look at it in a couple of weeks here. So let's go to this graph right here. Currently, right now, if you're looking on the financial markets, you'll see that oil is pegged at kind of around $100 a barrel, $98 a barrel. But the reality is what it costs Now, if you see here, we have two price frames here on the screen here. We have the price of oil in the futures contract, and then we have oil as in real oil, real ships, physical delivery, refineries, storage, and logistics. That's the price that people are paying, and that's only going to go higher. So let's look at the logistic routes that Cyrus is talking about. We're going to bring up a video here just to show you guys an example here. Now, this is the oil in December 2025, kind of moving along. We got to remember the average container ship flows at about the speed of a bicycle. Okay, you can see here bicycle speed. Let's pull up that again. Bicycle speed in context with a VLCC oil tanker. So imagine driving a bike from the Middle East, first of all, getting to Asia, then getting all the way to the United States. We have a problem, and we have an epic problem on, I would say, a global meltdown here, exactly what we named the program today. Now, let's see where that spills onto. That spills onto the fertilizer, which Cyrus was talking about earlier. Look at the price of fertilizer in the last couple of months here. Absolutely skyrocketing, okay? Now, what happens with fertilizer? We need it to put in our crops. We can't do that, or we can do that. It's going to be at a massive premium. So we're going to start to see many things happen here. Now, let's pull up this graph here, one more chart, and you will see the channels and how the tankers, where they're flowing. Now, on this chart, this is produced by JP Morgan, okay? And it's telling us how many barrels of oil in what nations. Now, remember the IEA, there's 1.4 billion barrels of oil stockpiled, right? Do the math. We burned through 400 million of that. We are out of supply anywhere from 12 to 20 million barrels of oil a day. Do the math. Now we're down to about 1 billion oils of stockpile. Remember, that has taken decades to build. Once we burn through that, everything is not going to feel normal again. Let's see what other photos that we got here. We got another one. Now, let's talk about the trader-in-chief, the White House derivative traders who love melting down the market in front of you. Let's look at this chart. Very simple. On March 23rd, a large time of trades, oil trades were made. On April 7th, before the market, these trades were made. Now, these trades are not made on the average stock market that's only open 9 to 5, guys. These trades were done on the derivatives market. And, of course, immediately they say there's going to be a CFTC investigation and all this. Remember, that's a civil entity that will only have the power to civilly charge someone. No criminal charges will probably ever happen with this. So look at the potential gains. 85 million, 950 million, 148 million, 121 million. That's what we see on the surface. Those were done the 23rd, 7th, and just recently, another whopper of a trade. So I have to be honest with you guys here. This oil shock is going to run vibrations right through this planet, and we are in serious trouble here in the next 30 to 60 days. It doesn't matter if they open it up tomorrow morning. We have catastrophe on our hands here. And let's go to helium. I think we got a price for helium here. If you start to hear people canceling MRIs and stuff like that, well, helium is a component that is used in that. I was talking to a doctor in the United States about the use of helium. Look at the price. So this is all connected. Everything that the commander-in-chief or trader-in-chief, and Cyrus calls him the traitor-in-chief, everything that Donald Trump has pretty much said, he's window dressing. Remember, this is a real estate shyster, we'll call him, a mogul, and also a guy that likes to bankrupt his own companies. And he has pretty much bankrupted America here. I am telling you guys right now, in the next 30 to 60 days, watch the price of oil. They can't hold it down. They're trying to hold it down at the market here, giving these illusion prices of paper. These are paper trades in the derivatives market. And if anybody knows the derivatives market like me, they will totally understand that this is an absolute con job. It could even be when you're placing bets of $950 million minutes before the actual tweet goes out, that is not an individual. That is a government, and that is a government in huge strategies behind it. So, okay, back over to you, Cyrus.
Hey, Alex,
Larry,
let me ask you a question.
Yes,
let me
yes.
ask Alex a question. So the oil, when it's loaded onto a tanker, is that already have a set price from a futures contract, or it is whenever it reaches its destination, it's whatever the price is at that time?
So what we see on CNBC, all these apps, Google Finance, all these apps, we see a paper commitment. But this oil is never delivered. It's only paper commitment. So they're buying and selling these derivatives. It's kind of like a promissory note. But when it's on there, what we should really take into consideration is dated, D-A-T-E-D, dated Brent, for example, from the United Kingdom. This is the physical price, and you're not going to find this data. Do we have that website handy? Guys, you got to see this. Let me pull this up. This is so hard to dig and find out this information. But we have a website that we'll try to bring up. I gave it to my guy backstage earlier. But anyway, we'll look for it. But I want to bring it up because this really answers your question, Larry. It shows the calendar months, and we might even have a graph here. Do we have a graph of that at 1:30? Okay, have a look at this, Larry. On the screen now, you'll see it. Physical delivery, paper markets. Paper markets are absolute BS. The physical delivery is what it costs. So it doesn't matter. There may be a commitment on paper that we'll deliver it at $90 or $100. But you see, there's even a 30% discrepancy there on the physical delivery. So can we have a promise when the VLCCs have left? No. And anybody that tells you that, they must know a lot more about the oil market than the oil traders and the shippers, because once it gets to the other end of that port, unloaded into the refineries, and that spot price on land can be totally different. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, there is desperation. These countries are burning through their reserves.
Are we watching, The Big Short Part 2? So, I remember that when The Big Short came out and Steve Carroll played that character, it revolved around three or four different individuals, and the guy Barry, who was predicting that the thing was going to crash. Everybody else seemed oblivious to it, and I can't help but think, by God, we're doing the same thing again.
Yeah. I want to answer this, Larry. I want to go into a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to pass it off to Cyrus. I appreciate you guys giving me the platform to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Now, I've been in this market for 20 years, okay? I saw 2006, 2007. I saw Peter Schiff. He has been a guest on our show. This guy's a brilliant guy. He also called the housing market crash with the credit default swaps. That market absolutely crashed. Peter Schiff was never invited back on those networks again. Okay, and a few years after that, the IRS investigated him. Go figure. So if we're going to understand what's going on here, this makes 2008 look like an absolute picnic, because this is going to reverberate around the entire globe. And the other thing is most people in the stock market, look at that, Friday. We are here in Friday. It's crazy. Friday, the S&P has an all-time high on the market when 20% of the world's oil supply is crippled. What? No. So what we're seeing here is massive market manipulation. This can't really be, taken advantage from the average shareholder, because the average shareholder on the stock market today, Larry, only knows what to do on one situation: buy a share, hold it, hope it goes up, and sells it. But people like me that have been into this derivative market, who have a good group of guys that we trade, anybody can reach out to me by email, and to try to understand this. And one more point here, guys, and I know I'm going a bit crazy here, but we've had to try to open up some accounts lately into the derivatives market in some U.S. brokerages. And they are getting very funny with us, saying, well, we're not sure if this item is acceptable to the average investor. They are trying to do everything they can to, I would say, make it extremely difficult for the common person to get into the derivatives market. And with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of studying, you can take advantage of what's about to happen. And I would predict that unless magical things happen next week or in the next 10 days, look out, because 2008 is going to look like a picnic. Back to you guys.
Yeah, well, Alex, I mean, I love the analysis here, and I think this is a big part of what we wanted to get into, because you brought up that animation of the basically the oil tankers and how it moves out. That's a really good animation, because what's incredible, I don't think everybody really appreciates this, is that oil tanker. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of weight on those boats. They're traveling at about 10 knots a mile on the 10 knots, 10 nautical knots is what their speed is.
Bring
So
up
it's
that
like
chart there. Have a look at that, Cyrus. I mean, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, it just takes. I think what I want to mention, one thing that you said earlier, Alex, is everything moves forward in the future. So again, this is the key point. We have oil tankers arriving in U.S. ports and Asian ports and African ports and European ports as of right now. But all of those ships that are arriving, this week, they left before February 28th. So again, even if let's just say there's a magical deal between Trump and Iran, everything's peaches, everything's glory, there's a 2-month window there where they've been taken off the market. So here's the key indicator. Lufthansa, the German airline, has canceled 20,000 flights this summer. Jet fuel prices in Europe has accelerated by 100%. They've doubled in price over the last couple of weeks. So we're seeing a tremendous, Europe already is just getting hammered. They're the biggest losers in this war. Number one, a country like Germany, they've already lost, all of their natural gas from Russia, right? So this has already impacted a tremendous amount of German manufacturing, because that was their ticket to success, right? All of these German manufacturers were able to get cheap energy from Russia for many years, and that's what powered these German factories. Now, of course, since 2022, that's been off the market. United States took out the Nord Stream line. Germans are just happy to comply with that, because they are, essentially just, obeying orders from the U.S. government. Yeah. But it's a huge problem for these German manufacturers. It got to the point when we were looking at BMW and Mercedes. For the last 4 or 5 years, the only thing that saved these companies was actually having access to the Asian market, specifically China. But now they're in a bigger crunch, because, as Alex and I have covered in our videos over the last couple of years, all of these foreign car brands are struggling tremendously in China, because China has now switched to EVs. I mean, 60% of the cars on the road are electric vehicles. So you're seeing, every single foreign brand in China is struggling as far as the auto industry, because, Chinese consumers now prefer Chinese brands and the electrical vehicles. So that market, that basically kept them up. I mean, this is the CEO of Mercedes-Benz basically said, through the pandemic, the only thing that saved our company was actually the Chinese market. That's what saved us, because we're getting hammered here at home, because our manufacturing costs have increased so much. But now you're looking at a double whammy. Now you're looking at the oil market being disrupted, and crude oil. It's actually very fascinating, how that gets refined, and how that it's not just obviously, like, gasoline is one thing that gets refined. But interesting enough, I mean, the gas prices, I'm here in Las Vegas. We have some of the highest gas prices in the market. I'm, right across my studio here in Las Vegas. We have a Shell gas station. It was up to $5.45 this morning, as I drove into the office today.
Cyrus, that's being polite. $5 is polite. Right now, that is going to rocket.
It is.
Have a look at this, guys. This is the website I'm talking about. Now, you have to go into a deep dive to understand what this is, but this is dated Brent. You'll see the prices there. This is what they're paying at the docks. Now, this could go up $10, $15, even $20 a barrel more than the price fix. Good luck even finding this this is a government website. Most of these are actually hidden behind a real-time paywall for you to actually find the prices, because they're done with people on the docks that are making sure to get this stuff into the pipeline and then into the refineries. We're going to Cyrus, again, it's not just the gas, right? Like, you're seeing it, you're feeling it at the pump there. But I spent 2 days here in Shanghai at the China Plastic 2026. It was about plastic and rubber. Who did I see there? Everybody from the Middle East was there. I said, what's going on, guys? Well, we used to be very competitive, but we got commitments with our customers and we're screwed. I said, so how is China? Well, they said, right now, China's going to actually, they're very affordable compared to what we're paying. That tsunami is absolutely coming, guys. I tell you now. And, you know, we've said it many times on the show, and we predicted this many times on the show. My buddy Cyrus and I, we have nailed it. People laughed at us when we said oil's going over $100 a barrel. They said, yeah, nice try. But boy, oh boy, this is the information. I spent all week researching it for you guys. Being a derivative trader for 20 years, I'm telling you now, look out, get prepared. And I got to tell you, Cyrus, are we seeing preppers talk online maybe about food? I'm curious. Maybe Larry and you guys can chat about that. You know, guys that are preparing themselves for massive food costs, stuff like that. Is that happening in the U.S.?
Well, I know that Michael Yan has been talking about it for quite a while. And this is one of those, I call this the tsunami effect, because if you recall, back when it hit Thailand, what was that, 14 years ago now? I can't remember. The start of it is you're sitting there at the beach and all of a sudden the water starts pulling away. And it's tranquil. You know, there's no noise or visual alarming event. You just see this water disappearing, receding. And hey, this is great. Look at all the extra beach space we have. Yeah. And then boom, all of a sudden, here comes the water. And then it's in a moment. It just overwhelms you. And I think we're going to see the economic equivalent of that. That's what we're witnessing right now. We're witnessing the water's receding. Everybody's nothing to worry here. Pay no attention. And then when it hits, people are going to be running around panic. How could this happen? That's where I think it's what you've been doing is very important. But, you know, just go back to the Old Testament. Look at what they did to Jeremiah, to Isaiah, to all the prophets that tried to warn. They usually they weren't welcome.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point, Larry. I mean, I think what you know, it was really interesting. I was on Twitter earlier this week, and you know, we have some very bullish, you know, Trump supporters and some guys that are in the stock market, and it was funny because you're hearing the opposite here, Alex. I saw some guys, you know, that actually said, guys, you know, here's the truth. The United States will never allow the stock market to crash again because here's why: is we have the quantitative easing. You know, no matter what happens, we can just pump more dollars into the system. We're always going to keep up. You know, the stock market's going up. We've just hit this all-time high. Everything's good. But I think what's interesting, Alex, and something that you and I have observed over the last few weeks is that if you notice it, guys, every Friday afternoon, there's some type of tweet from Donald Trump that is, you know, warning that, hey, I just had a great discussion with Iran. You know, actually, guys, we have a great relationship with Iran right now. Like everything's going great. And you know, we know the stock market. It looks for the future. And so I think like we're at a very interesting, you know, time in our lives where, you know, the U.S. president is able to control the stock market, you know, with a tweet. Basically, if he can set out something positive around 3 p.m., you know, Friday afternoon, New York time, you know, the markets are like, hey, you know, this situation's under control. But again, you know, there is a point where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And again, you know, I mean, and so again, you just have to look at the end of the day, if we're not getting this oil out of the strait, and this is going to have global ramifications. You know, we've seen countries in throughout Southeast Asia. You know, the Philippines, for example. You know, they are like 91% of their oil comes from the Middle East. I think Japan is like 94%. So you're looking at some of these countries that are really, really exposed there because they are desperate. And so you're seeing a lot of, you know, again, you know, we saw some, you know, in Myanmar, for example, you know, queues of 3 to 4 hours of motorbikes lining up, desperate to try to get gas. People are starting to walk to work because, they're trying to conserve that motorbike, supply that they have. They're only going to use that motorbike if they can. They've cut schools and government jobs down to 4 days a week, trying to conserve energy. And again, this is what's happening in April, right now. So again, we have to be looking at, coming, what's going to happen over the next couple of months, because it's coming. I mean, it's becoming. And again, go ahead.
I'll tell you what's coming, guys. My bet went on Friday. I pivoted from my options and derivatives trade Friday. I'm on, trust me, I'm on the right side here, and I know this is coming. Why? This is an interesting figure for everybody. Listen up. The reality is the United States is a net consumer of 2.2 million barrels of oil every single day. 60 to 70 million barrels, boys. And the last one just emptied its tanker on your shores a few days ago. Now what are you going to do? Is this the same administration that sat on its hands when a world pandemic was happening on the other side of the world, saying, well,
Right.
not going to affect me. No, that's not going to hurt me. Really? Did you see what the market did? And what I get so tired about, Cyrus, is when people say, the hardworking American that has their money in their 401k, the hardworking American that has saved money to buy into these American companies, that they can one day be proud to be shareholders, to live a good life because they've worked all their goddamn life. But what happens? Just look at the graphs here. These markets get absolutely smashed. World pandemic, smashed. Look at the last year, Liberation Day. Let's celebrate while we see the stock market come off by 30 to 40% as it hits new lows last April. And then they have the audacity to tell people to say, just buy the dip. How are you going to buy the dip on a market when you've been decimated in your own stock portfolio? Well, once again, as Cyrus has said, and as I've said many times on this program, the trader-in-chief and the traitor-in-chief, after hours, gets on his, and we shouldn't even call it Truth Social. We should just call it Trump Social. And he blasts out to everybody and say, okay, here it is. I'm going to window dress the market for the weekend. But I'm telling you, he's going to run out of time because these boats go the speed of bicycles. And unless Mr. Trump and his administration, and don't get me wrong, guys, 2016, I was all about make America great again. We had it on this program many times with Cyrus. We thought we were going into the golden years here. And something has I have no idea what we're doing in Iran. The only strategy I can think about is this is going to try to hurt Russia and China. And that is going to backfire.
Yeah. Well, let me ask another another indicator. So when Trump came into office, U.S. debt was like 37 trillion, and now in the last 77 days, it went up another $1 trillion. So it's now 39 trillion. So from January 20th of 2025 until say December, it went up $1 trillion, and then in a space of less than three months, hit another trillion. That seems, is that going to, do you think that'll keep accelerating? Are we on is that like on a glide path that, we'll see another trillion in maybe 60 days and then another trillion in 40 days?
Oh, I think, that's why I laughed when Donald Trump said, I'm a very cost conscious person. I'm really, the audacity of that video. And that's where, we've seen this type of behavior from Donald Trump where, we know Donald Trump, he speaks off the cuff. He just really says whatever's on his mind. But unfortunately, I think we're at a position now where any news coming out of the White House, you have to just think that it is speculation at this point because there's just not a lot of truth that's coming out. Donald Trump is not a cost-conscious person. Launching a war in Iran, and again, if we go back to the earlier days, I remember showing a news clip on this show where one of the Fox News reporters says, "Guys, we have full faith in Donald Trump because the White House has said that they have used Venezuela as a template for this war." and it is going to go the exact same way as Venezuela. It's going to be a quick war, nothing really, nothing too extensive here, guys. But, and I just thought to myself, oh my Lord, if you are thinking Iran is like Venezuela, we are in for a world of hurt right now, because the two couldn't be different there. And I think what we're seeing here, and I kind of want to get into this military, operation here and what's going to happen, because I think, now with this, latest assassination attempt and, the chaos that's erupting here, I think it's going to be an opportunity for Trump to kind of justify, you know what, we now need to send in ground troops. We need to really escalate this war. And I think we're going to go further down that escalation trap and actually going to see, U.S. troops being deployed and, an aggressive move being made. Because, again, the United States and Israel, they've got to get a win out of this. And so for them, they have to justify some way. The continuation, the last week, we've essentially been at a stalemate where Iran is saying, look, we're not going to talk to you. We don't want to meet with you. We don't want to talk to you. We have very specific demands. One of them is we want you to pay for all the damage that has been done. Guys, here's an interesting thing that just came out in the last 24 hours. It just now, mainstream media is reporting that United States bases in the Middle East were actually struck by the Iranian military. Now, this is why it's so important to follow independent media like these YouTube channels. Larry, you've been on my show 3 or 4 times. We've done one-on-one interviews on my YouTube channel. But I mean, Larry, we were talking about that month, 6 weeks ago. We knew this. And this is what is so amazing is that, now all of a sudden it's coming out in the Wall Street Journal and like, hey guys, by the way, at the beginning of this war, there were United States military bases attacked. And I'm thinking, we all knew that. Come on, we know. Of course, they've been attacked. We knew that, but that's kind of the delay that we're seeing here. In that all of a sudden, 6 to 7 weeks later, it's slowly being admitted, and of course, it's being admitted, right when there was an assassination attempt on the United States president at one of the at the most high profile, White House dinner. The White House Correspondents' Dinner is a massive event. And so, again, they're going to release that because it's a small little news blurb that's going to go under the radar because obviously everybody's focused on, who's the shooter? Where's he from? How did this happen? Where was the security failure? And so this is the problem is that, mainstream media doesn't want to admit what's actually happening. But I mean, Larry, you and I have talked about this. I mean, we talked about the fact that there are 13 bases in the Middle East. When you look at Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, all of these, all 13 were attacked. All 13 were hit. And many of them were hit so bad that they have been deemed unlivable. And they actually had to take United States troops. We had to take our troops and actually start housing them in hotels because they couldn't stay in the barracks there because they were destroyed. And so again, this is why, I think you have to be on YouTube. You have to be looking at these independent voices because, we're not controlled by the narrative. We're just reporting what's actually happening in the intelligence that we're able to see. And it's very, very alarming that it took 7 weeks for the mainstream media to finally admit, that our military bases have been attacked. But I mean, again, this couldn't have been a worse disaster, I think, for the United States. Up until this point. I mean, we're going into week 9, and I'm not sure if you guys saw that clip earlier this week when Donald Trump, they said, a reporter said, Trump, how long are we going to go with this? How much further? And he's like, well, just a second. We were in Vietnam for 18 years. We're in Iraq for, a long time. We were in Korea for 7 years. Guys, I've only been doing this for 6 weeks. And then the reporter goes, sir, we're entering week 9. Well, yeah, I took a couple of weeks off, guys. I took a couple of weeks off. Yeah. But don't be asking me about timelines here. I mean, we've been in other conflicts for years to come. That's not a good answer, Larry. I mean, is that Donald Trump basically trying to prep us, saying that we're potentially looking at a multi-year conflict with Iran now? This is just going to be a disaster.
Let's remember that we spent 20 years in Afghanistan. And I seem to recall, I may be mistaken, but I think Donald Trump was president during 4 of those years. So, he helped preside over a war that went on for 20 years and didn't get resolved. Look, there is no military solution to the war with Iran. And because the notion of ground forces, we've got in our memory the invasion of Iraq from 23 years ago now. I can't believe, God, it's almost a quarter of a century. I'm going, this getting an old thing, man. Time just goes zipping by.
Yep.
But in 2003, you could assemble a ground force in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia without fear that they were going to be hit. There was some concern about Scud missiles, but that never really materialized. So we were able to build up a ground force of 165,000 troops over an 12-month period, because we don't have that Star Trek teletransporter where you can just say, beam them up, Scotty, and just move them instantaneously from point A to point B. You got to either put them on airplanes or you got to put them on ships. Those are the only two ways. And airplanes, actually, we look at the C-17s, those are big, seemingly big, but in terms of carrying a combat load, so soldiers that are fully loaded out for combat, they can only carry 120. So then you have to start using commercial airline services, commandeer the aircraft from, American Airlines and United Airlines, et cetera. So first is the problem, how are you going to move those troops? Second, do we even have those troops? I mean, right now, the force of the United States Army is 452,000. I think the Marine Corps is somewhere around 120,000. So we've got actually limited number of soldiers. But then the question is, where do you assemble them? Where are you going to place them physically to be prepared to launch a ground operation into Iran? Because you've got to say now that with the era of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones, something that these did not exist 23 years ago like they do now. We're in a completely different tactical environment. So those troops have to be far enough away where they can be defended. And they said, well, we'll just put up our Patriot missiles and our THAAD missiles. We're out of those. I mean, I can't. Was it the Wall Street Journal or CNN? They put out a report the other day saying they depleted 50% of the stock.
Yeah,
nonsense. Yeah. Here are the numbers. The total number of PAC-3 missiles that were produced for the Patriot missile system as of December 31st, 2025, 4,620. Lockheed Martin is making roughly, let's give them 60 of those a month. So we've got now another 180 to add on to that. When those are used operationally in the field, if there's a missile fired at a Patriot that's coming where a site where a Patriot battery is defending, the Patriot battery will fire a minimum of 2 missiles. Now, we know that the Patriot has been used in Ukraine, and the estimate there is about 1,000 that were employed. Okay, so take your 4,600, subtract 1,000 off of that. In the course of the 4 years, Russia's fired over 12,000 missiles. Okay, so the Patriots have only been used, here or there, but that's exhausted. And so now we're down to, let's say, 3,000, let's call it 3,800. That means that if Iran fires a little over 1,600, 1,700 missiles, that's going to exhaust the PAC-3. Well, how many tactical missiles has Iran fired over the last, the first 5 weeks of the war? About 4,000. So see, I mean, I don't do calculus, but by God, I can add and subtract. The numbers don't add up. So the whole notion that you're going to put a ground force that's going to be protected by air defense, there is no air defense to protect them. So, okay, what's the other alternative? Oh, we'll launch an amphibious operation where the Marines come charging off of boats. How are you going to get them into the Persian Gulf? They'll be blown up in the Strait of Hormuz if they dare to try to enter. In fact, that's the other point. We got these 3 carrier strike groups out there. Ooh, except we're keeping them about 600 to 700 miles offshore because of the Iranian missile threat with drones that are both underwater, surface level, and in the air. So this
Right.
naval force that used to be able to project power 23 years ago can't do the same now, because if it gets too close to shore, they're very vulnerable. So we've got to say, okay, our naval power, you can't use that. Ground force, oh, I'll tell you what, let's drop paratroopers in on Karg Island. That'll work. Okay, you're going to need about, let's say there are about 15,000 Iranians on that island. So let's say we want a force of 2,000. Well, to drop them in, you're going to need 22 C-130Js. So, I mean, this is, I keep talking about the actual logistics. Look at what's required to put troops on the ground, and not just get them there, sustain them. Because if you start firing at somebody, you run out of ammunition and you got to get a reload. So how do you get that reload there? And, we're about 2 weeks from the temperatures in that entire area, from the Persian Gulf going west, particularly in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, you'd be better off inside a pizza oven. I mean, it gets up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius. And so when you're in that kind of temperature, your troops, you got to have water. If you don't have water, man, you die. They dehydrate quickly. So, like I said, the logistics problems keep piling up, and any possibility of a ground operation from here forward becomes more difficult, almost impossible.
Larry,
sorry to go on my rant.
No. That's
great insights.
No, Larry, that's why we have you here. I mean, we love your analysis, and I mean, this is what the show is all about. Is getting a nice platform here that we can have just a nice live discussion and discuss this, because I think I want to go back to your comment about 2003. Reminds me of a conversation I had with our good friend Colonel Danny Davis, who I know all of us are familiar with. Who's doing great work on YouTube, and who we've chatted with. Now, Danny Davis is very interesting because he served during those during that 2003 campaign, and so he was really telling me, Cyrus, I remember for example, I flew to Germany. We had to stage in Germany, and like you said, how do you assemble 165,000 men? Well, that took 11 months to do, right? You can't just get 165,000 people flying to one destination one time. No, it takes stages, right? You have to, we flew, 3,000 guys in, get them staged in Germany. Okay, then we're going to move them over to, Saudi Arabia, or then it takes a long time to be able to mobilize this and organize this. And, just think about the logistics. I mean, golly, if we're going to organize 30 people, to come to, Las Vegas for an event. I mean, we got to feed these people, right? We got to, now try to do this times 165,000 people in a foreign country, and I mean, things have changed, and this is where everything has happened, right? 23 years ago, drones did not exist, right? There was not a drone that had been invented yet, and that now we're seeing, again, I saw this great clip, great comment where they're saying, okay, we have these advanced missiles. Let's just say they cost $1 million or $500,000. Okay, well, Iran can get a drone for $10,000 and essentially take that out, or essentially launch a counterattack. So like you said, we're pretty good at basic arithmetic here. If you're spending, let's call it conservative, $500,000 on a missile, but Iran has a $10,000 drone. There's a strategic advantage there as far as the cost. And again, things have shifted. We're not going to see, hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops be able to go in here and launch this. I want to also bring up, this Karg Island, because this is what's been sold to us in the media, is that all of a sudden 90% of, Iran's oil is being loaded up on the tankers in Karg Island. We take that Karg Island, we shut down Iran's economy. They're going to come begging to the negotiating table. There's something that, Professor Morandi, who's been, on our show as well, very, very good spokesman, who just tells the truth. He's like, guys, this is a fight for survival from Iran. We don't care, right? Even if you take a Karg Island, okay, that's basically the staging area, right? That's where the oil gets loaded onto tankers. Okay, you take it out. All right, well, we can choose. It's not like you're taking control of the oil. You're just taking control of the point where it gets on ships. But the problem is that just takes inventory off of the global market. So kind of tying back into Alex's point here, talking about, what is the actual price of this price of oil and the barrel of crude? The simple thing is, again, in the United States, we hear this message that, hey, guess what? We're a net petroleum exporter, right? We actually export a lot of oils because we have it here. The problem is you got to think of it like a bathtub, okay? And just think of it as a bathtub, and you have multiple spigots going into this bathtub, and the oil is pouring into this bathtub. So it doesn't matter where the oil comes from, whether it's Canada, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq. It doesn't matter where the oil is coming from. It basically gets funneled into this massive bathtub, and then you extract the oil at one certain price. That's why we're seeing, for example, Russia is actually benefiting tremendously from this because, it's like, well, great. I'm making a lot more money now because I'm getting my oil hits, it doesn't matter if it's Venezuela, Russia, and Saudi Arabia oil, it's coming from the same bathtub and it's one price across the globe. So Putin's thinking, great. Hey, thanks for this nice increase. 2 months ago, a barrel of crude was $50-$60. Now it's over $100. Well, guess what? You've just increased my margins. I'm making more money because we know the Russian economy is, very dependent on exporting oil. The other factor that I want to bring up, I mentioned this in a video that I made, is that the United States economy actually consumes a lot more oil than other nations, even more than Russia, even more than China. So what that means is like the economic unit of measure in order to produce, $1 of GDP growth here in the United States, we're about 40% more than China. Because if you look about it, how does our cargo get transported around here, right? It gets transported on massive trucks, right? The trucking industry is huge. So you're looking at the cost of diesel, right? Again, a gas station across the street from my office, $6.35 for a gallon of diesel fuel. I mean, we talk about these food shortages and stuff. Hate to tell it to you guys, there's only one way that food gets to grocery stores, and it's on massive trucks. And this is, again, an advantage for a country like China, which has invested tremendously in renewable energy. And this is a strategy where China, again, it's very interesting because we hear this narrative as well that, hey, we started the Iran war to basically destroy China. And I remember my senator, and actually, Larry, you're in Florida as well. We both have Florida roots, or Florida connections, I should say. But basically, what was it? Rick Scott, he said, hey, I'm okay with the Iran war because if not a single barrel of oil goes to China and we can completely destroy the Chinese economy, that will be a very happy day for me. That was an actual quote from Rick Scott, the U.S. Senator. And it's just so ignorant and stupid because the thing is that, number one, if the Chinese economy were to get destroyed, that would also have global ramifications. Hate to tell it to you, but the United States economy is very dependent on the Chinese, economy as well. The two are interconnected. Of course, this is a cornerstone of my YouTube channel. I focus a lot on U.S.-China relations. But, and again, going back to Alex's point, look at the Liberation Day, April 2nd, 2025. Great day for the United States. Yeah, it was a great day because the next month the stock market completely crashed by 30% because everyone knows, hey, guys, we cannot start a war with China. And this is essentially what China did. They just had to wait. They didn't do anything. They didn't panic because they're like, hey, guys, we know how this works. You're going to come to the negotiating table because you're screwed without China. There's no way your U.S. economy can go. And this is why we saw Trump taco out multiple times against China, because China has the leverage in this situation. They don't have to do anything. And this has been kind of the continuous theme for China over the last 12 to 13 months is basically just sit back and wait for Trump to kind of give you a better option because we know that Trump is going to have to negotiate. And so, again, I mean, there's so many different things at play here. But I just think that, Alex, you mentioned a really good point to me earlier this week. You said, look at the effects of COVID. It took about 3 months for us to kind of feel those effects. And so obviously the effects are not going to happen today. But, as we're coming into this summer season where, we're again, summer holidays happen, travel, we're starting to see warnings of Europeans saying, hey, your summer vacation's not going to go as planned. I mean, a massive red flag to me. Again, I mentioned it earlier. Lufthansa canceling 20,000 flights this summer, simply saying we are not going to have the jet fuel needed in order to do that. Well, guess what? if that's going to cause the price of all of these airline tickets to skyrocket. I'm actually going with my family in about 3 weeks. We're going to China. I'm very glad I booked those tickets very early, because I can just imagine the prices are going to keep going, continue to skyrocket in the future. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing just a lot of pain that's going to be coming. And I think the thing that I'm worried about is, here we are, guys. I mean, we're just a couple days away from May. This started on February 28th. And at this point, right now, April 26th, we have absolutely no clear path to an exit ramp. We have no clear path to a United States victory, whatever that means, whatever that's going to be. Israel's doubling down. I mean, Netanyahu's happy because he's got the war that he's been, basically praying for the last 3 decades. We could go back. I mean, there's clips going back to, as early as, early 2000s with Netanyahu saying the same thing every week. Guys, Iran is 2 weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. 2 weeks away. And then it's the same message for 30 years. And he finally found a U.S. president that was going to go and take the bait and go and start a war with Iran. But like I said, Morani said, hey, take Karg Island if you want. Actually, I think Iran is actually very open to that. Hey, you want to send U.S. troops in the ground into Iran? Go for it. We would like nothing more than that. So, we are looking at a escalation. I think I'm very confident in predicting that there's going to be further escalation from this point, in opposed to the opposite, which would be a peaceful resolution.
Yeah. Karg Island can be, it's Farsi for Dien Bien Phu. Okay, so, and for those who don't know what Dien Bien Phu is, that was the location in Vietnam where the French got surrounded and basically wiped out in 1954. I'll correct you on the drones. Actually, the drones were around in 2000, 2001, the big ones, the CIA project. They were top secret at the time.
Okay.
And,
Gotcha.
and I do recall right after 9/11, when the CIA was tracking people in Afghanistan, one of my buddies who was in charge of the program told me that they were monitoring this one. They were following this pickup, these two, Taliban types, and the truck's driving along, and then it pulls over to the side of the road, and the two guys get out to engage in what is called sexual congress. So they were, there was being voyeurism via drones back then. But you started thinking, how many times have you been in a truck with another guy and said, "Hey, you want to pull over to the side of the road?" And so there's that sort of ridiculous point. But the cost, you talked about the missiles, Patriot missiles, those PAC-3s, each one costs between $4 and $6 million. Okay, so you're firing two. So every time you fire two, you're chalking up $8 to $12 million. The THAAD, which we produce, total inventory is about 900, and that was at the start. That's assuming we'd never used any, which we had. Those come in at $12 to $13 million a piece. So, and as you pointed out, some of the drones that they're taking out cost $50,000, $100,000. So, what sort of economic model works where you're spending, $10 million to $24 million to take out something that costs $50,000? It just doesn't work.
Larry, I have a question for you. And just before I do that, I just want to mention, and I want to also follow up with Cyrus's point, oil at 100. Actually, I really want to start talking about the actual true value of oil right now. And we have given you guys examples today here. It's when that oil actually hits the shores at that spot. And right now we are seeing a 20 to 30% premium. We might see 40, 50, even $100 more premium on that. There's also confusion about the United States. We keep hearing, yes, it's one of the largest oil producers. Correct. But it also imports more than it does export. And what I'm talking about here, this is kind of like a chemistry issue. You see, when you have the fracking oil, the refineries aren't ready for that in the United States. They're ready for the good old sweet Texas oil, the oil from Venezuela. Go figure why we went in there. And also from Canada as well. Now, the problem is the United States has to actually import more of that oil to its refineries to serve the appetite of the American consumer. So we are not in a good position in the United States. We keep being told by the administration,
Right.
don't worry, $90, $100 a barrel, a couple more dollars at the pump, no problem. Go back and look at the graphs. Go back and look at the oil crisis in 1973, what happened back there. I think we might even have that figure up here. It's a 3-base chart. Let me have a look here. Yes, this one here, right there, the first one there, right here. So this is a physical market, and major disruptions happen throughout lifetimes. And the issue here now is we all saw what Saddam Hussein did to his oil wells. He lit them up in flames, and it took years for that to put out. And I know I want to be positive, and I am positive because I'm on the right side of the trade here. I am definitely on the right side of the trade here. This is going to go real bad, real fast. I started to feel this Friday when I was putting on my derivatives trades. I pivoted. I stopped and said, wait a minute. This is impossible, mathematically impossible to get caught up in time here when tankers go about the speed of bicycles. It's just not going to happen. So my question for Larry is, and this is a very serious question, Larry, when all hell breaks loose in the United States, where people can't gas up their cars, they can't get the food that they need for the prices that they're used to, when the electricity, the lights go out, power grids go down, the apocalyptic approach. Sir, you are one of the most intelligent people that can answer this. What does the government do for preparation when the power grids go down, the oil runs out, the food runs out? How is America? That's the question I have for America. How are you going to prepare for that? Because you are just days away from this happening. And Cyrus, my comment to your flight, I hope it was with a Chinese carrier, because if it's with an American carrier, they might not honor that flight back home to the United States. They may go bankrupt, just like Spirit Airlines did last week. So Larry, tell me, the apocalyptic approach, what kind of stuff is the government, do they plan for this kind of stuff if it happens, or am I just shooting some fiction?
Look, I spent 23 years scripting terrorism exercises for JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, that involves Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Task Force 160. And out of those exercises, you're supposed to get, quote, lessons learned that you experience with the limitations. Our example, 20 years ago now, we did an exercise in Nevada near Las Vegas with Delta Force, where it was simulating an attack on an Iranian nuclear facility buried underground. Okay, we did, and the lesson learned out of that was, don't do it. It's too costly. You're gonna lose too many assets. So whatever exercises have been done, I guarantee you there have been no lessons learned from that. And so in the midst of that panic that you're describing, we could literally see the likelihood of martial law being instituted, because people will be storming grocery stores, taking things, and so there'll be deployment of National Guard. We'll be probably pulling back troops from overseas. We'll have a contraction of U.S. military presence internationally, and that's why I'm a firearms instructor. I'm loaded for bear. So, but at that point, the idea of self-defense. Also, I keep about I don't consider myself a prepper, but I keep myself at least a 2-month supply of food, because you don't know what's going to happen. And that's if anybody assumes that the government knows what it's doing and has planned for this, forget about that. I have seen it too many times that the government is not prepared. They don't plan ahead, and the people that usually try to bring those warnings, they're not welcome to meetings, because you're not bringing good news. Oh, and
hey, Larry,
the other thing though, wait, the other dimension to this, and it shifts it a little bit off topic, but it goes back to the U.S. relationship with China. Most of the weapon systems that are now being depleted, precision missiles is an example, that the supply chain for those comes out of China, for God's sake. And what are we doing? We're pissing China off. And that's why I say the Chinese now, I've imagined Xi Jinping sitting in his television room, big bag of popcorn, and he's just watching what's going on in Iran, because he's going, hey, is this sweet or what? We support the Iranians. They're draining the United States of all of their critical weapon systems that could be used against us, and we don't have to fire a shot. And he goes, is this a great world or what? So I see China, China is actually benefiting from this enormously.
Yeah, gentlemen, I made a video earlier this week, asking a question, is China the biggest winner of the Iran war? And, and I think this is, kind of something that Alex and I have been covering a lot of, we go back to the tariff situation, where China had tremendous leverage. And I think I want to highlight this in 2026, we have seen a unbelievable amount of United States allies. Alex, you're Canadian. We've seen Canada, we've seen the UK, Ireland, South Korea, most recently with Spain, basically sending their leaders directly to Beijing, meeting with Xi Jinping, signing an unprecedented amount of trade deals. We just saw the United Arab Emirates sign 24 new trade deals with China in this last week, and essentially also attacking the United States dollar, saying, look, if you guys don't sort this out, we're going to have to start pivoting to other currencies, most likely the Chinese yuan. And so there's a lot of interesting things happening. And like you said, I agree with your analysis there, Larry, as far as Xi Jinping sitting back with a pile of popcorn and just saying, you know what, we are. I mean, we're just going to wait. There's a meme online, right? It's like the CIA has uncovered a huge Chinese plot. To sit back and watch the United States continue to make massive mistakes.
Yeah.
This is the latest intel from the CIA. I've got a question for you, Larry. Some really good questions coming in from one of and guys, we're starting to get a lot of super chats to the channel. I appreciate your support to our channel here as we are, continue to bring you the best insights we can. Larry, you've been a fantastic guest today. This has been amazing. One of our questions was, Larry, what is a exit strategy for the United States at this point?
For Donald Trump to consummate an agreement with Iran that he'll be able to go out and say, unlike the JCPOA that was limited to 10 years, we have secured a permanent agreement that Iran will not produce a nuclear weapon, that we've got full inspection of all Iranian nuclear sites, and that they will put their 60% enriched uranium in the hands of the Russians. And he says, great, we have achieved this objective that the previous presidents failed to achieve. Now, the fact of the matter is, Iran had no intention to build a nuke. The only time that it actually started maybe having second thoughts was after February 28th, after we got sucker punched. So, but there is that exit strategy. Now, this time though, Iran, it comes with a price tag. You're going to return all of our frozen assets. You're going to lift all sanctions, and we're going to work with Oman, and we're going to charge an entry-exit fee in and out of the Persian Gulf in order to raise the cash to repair all the damage that you've done to us. But that deal is there to be had. The problem is Israel doesn't want it because, look, this has never been about Iranian nuclear ambitions for a nuclear weapon. Go back to 1980, so we're a year and a half into the Islamic Revolution in 1980, and the United States, Jimmy Carter signs a finding that authorizes the CIA to start working with Iraq, with the Gulf Arabs, get the Gulf Arabs to pony up money that's going to go to Iraq, and Iraq, Saddam Hussein launches a war, attacks Iran in September of 1980. And that then in comes Ronald Reagan, and by 81, 82, that finding has expanded, and the United States is now supplying Iraq with chemical precursors that are used to produce chemical weapons. By August of 83, Iraq is using chemical weapons against Iran, and Iraq is receiving intelligence, top secret intelligence about locations, positions of Iranian forces. So the United States is now doing everything it can to destroy Iran, and Iran hasn't even expressed any desire to quote a nuke. And during that, this goes on for 8 years. That in end of 86, start of 87, Saddam Hussein gets pissed off at the CIA because of Iran-Contra. Because when the revelation comes out that the United States is also supplying weapons to Iran, which are being used to attack and kill Iraqis, Saddam said, wait a second, I'm not, get out of here. He threw the CIA out and said he'd only accept intelligence from U.S. military personnel. And a personal friend of mine who's now deceased, Walter Patrick Lang, Pat was he'd been defense attaché in Saudi Arabia and Yemen. He's the one that was hand carrying the intelligence. He was accompanied by a lieutenant colonel named Rick Francona. So that went on to 88. And what brings this up, I was watching, that intro you did where George H.W. Bush is talking about what a bad guy Saddam was. For God's sake, he had been our asset for 8-9 years previously. And so you got to ask if I didn't know what I know now. If I knew that back at the time, I would have thrown the bullshit flag on what he was saying, because Saddam, the only reason he went after Kuwait was because Kuwait was stealing his oil, and he asked our ambassador, hey, do you got a problem if I go after that? No, we don't have a position on that. So he goes after it, and all of a sudden he's the world's greatest villain. That's why I say U.S. policy across the board, it's not founded upon actual reality. It's always a constructed narrative, but there is that exit plan. They construct it and say, hey, we've prevented Iran from getting a nuclear device. We've got this whole system in place. Peace is at hand. But I don't think the Zionist crowd that's controlling Trump will let him do that.
Yeah. Larry, I got a follow-up question. A couple of super chats have come in, and just want to say thank you to Cog Anderson 1483 for the super chats. And then another question here. Larry, is this part of the globalist depopulation plan?
It certainly can look that way. Yeah. It just, because this is so senseless. And you watch, this. There was nothing driving the need to attack Iran other than this desire, this false belief that, we can easily crush them. Because, look, this is about getting control, the physical control of Iran. Because Iran sits at this critical economic crossroads. The Russians want to use it as a north-south corridor to eliminate needing to go through the Bosporus and through the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal. If they can then go Russia, Caspian Sea to a railroad line or a trucking line in Iran, down to the Arabian Sea, as well as China. It was a major point for the old Silk Road, and they're doing their new Silk Road initiative. So getting control of Iran and its resources, as well as where it is actually located, because, if you will, this deep state vision is ultimately about weakening Iran, using Iran as a springboard to go after Russia, and then break up Russia, and then go after China. China is still the big kahuna in these delusional plans.
Right. Well, we definitely heard that from Rick Scott. Who's trying to say that, right. I mean, he says that's I alluded to earlier. Yeah, if we could stop China, if we could crash China's economy, that would be a happy day for me. Very, very naive way of thinking there. Gentlemen, I think we've had an amazing discussion. I do want to wrap things up here and kind of leave everybody the final word. So I just want to say from my perspective, it's been a fantastic show, a tremendous amount of support in the chat here. Thank you to everybody for tuning in to today's show. Great questions for Larry. Larry, I really appreciate your time coming on the stream and spending some time with us live. Always great to get your insights. You're one of the best. And, our fans certainly showed their love today. Great support, great turnout for our live stream. So just want to say that's all I have on my end. I'll leave it with Alex and Larry for the final words.
I can never get enough of Larry. Okay, I could probably leave this stream going for the next 20 hours and not run out of questions at all. But Larry, it's always a pleasure to share screens with you, and especially my good friend Cyrus Janssen. You see, what is interesting here is actually our worlds are colliding now, where we're starting to see geopolitics play a major impact on people's lives, whether it's financially, whether it's physically. I mean, we just seen a U.S. soldier betting on the capture of Maduro raid. He made $400,000 before prosecutors caught him betting on Polymarket, or one of the predictive markets. I mean, what a crazy world we're living in. But your insights are important, Larry. My concerns over the next couple of weeks, and I hope that we can have you on. I know you're a very busy guy and you're always doing a lot of these shows, and I have tremendous respect for you and our followers. But we are going to hit a crucial crossroad here in the next few weeks here. And we're going to need to rest. And I think it's shows like this. We come out every Sunday. We do a ton of research before it. And again,
Larry, do you ever worry about the threat of a potential nuclear bomb being dropped at some point during this conflict?
I was concerned about that until the other day when Donald Trump came out and finally said, no, you're not going to use nukes. That would be crazy. And that was apparently precipitated because I had learned that there had been a confrontation, or the whole issue of using nukes had come up at an emergency meeting on Saturday, 2 weeks ago. And that General Kane from the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, no, that's not even an option we're going to consider, and put Trump down. That thing went viral. They even made, the Iranians even made one of those Lego videos with I'm named in it. So I got a Lego.
Oh, nice.
That's nice. Hilarious.
I got a shot of that, I think.
Yeah. And as you pull it up, but that apparently that played a role in getting Trump to come out and say no nukes. The real story that I continue to focus on, and I much appreciate what Alex does. It's so important. The transformation of China in the last 54 years now started in 1972 to go from what was largely an agrarian society with a very relatively low literacy rate to being now the preeminent industrial power in the world. And in the process of that, they only engaged with one foreign military adventure. They've not been a militarized society, yet we in the United States and our politicians, there it is.
Nice.
Hilarious. But our politicians continue to treat China like it's this military power seeking to dominate the world. And yet everything that China does from a military standpoint is provoked by what we say and what we do against China. And I think that's why they see what's going on in Iran is preview of coming attractions. If they don't stop the West there, then China and Russia, they're up next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone, I want to say thank you so much for spending your Sunday with us here on YouTube. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with us, and we're very grateful for that support. We just want to say thank you so much as we continue to roll out our weekly show, Let's Talk Geopolitics. I think this is episode 5. Just very excited what Alex and I are trying to build here, and it obviously it helps when we have amazing guests like Larry Janssen here on the show.
Awesome, Larry. Awesome.
I could
Thanks,
listen to Larry speak, so much. We're definitely going to have him back on the show, and a lot of great comments from our community here. So I would just want to say thank you all. As always,
where can we find Larry, by the way?
Sonar21.com. That's the best. Or I've also got Larry C. Johnson as Substack. So,
Yeah,
but hey, guys,
absolutely.
appreciate all that you're doing, and likewise, I'm a big fan. So,
Yeah,
because when I
you know
first
what? And
first saw Alex on Reporterfy, I said, "Man, I got to get to know this guy."
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
love it. Love it, love it. No, and I love how you brought in China there at the end, because China's been a big focus of ours over the
Yeah.
years, and I'm just excited. We're leaving on May 18th. Flying to Hong Kong. I go back every summer with my family, bringing the wife and 3 kids back. We've got some really cool trips planned. Going to be going to Shanghai, Beijing, going to Guizhou to visit the world's tallest bridge. That's going to be very exciting, and I'm excited to kind of bring you guys along on the journey. Certainly going to be documenting my travels here on YouTube and doing a lot of creative live streams. I'm actually going to be trying to do a live stream from the bridge itself. We're going to work out the logistics of that. But I mean, this is a major story, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Larry, because more people need to understand, what the role that China's playing in our global economy. And again, I'm just very excited to keep going with the show. So thank you both for your amazing time. It's an honor to share the screen with both of you gentlemen, and thanks everybody for your amazing support today.
Have a great day, guys. Bye
Bye,
bye.
guys. Thanks.
Bye bye.